Hello, everyone. This is Parrish Alford with the Daily Journal. I'm joined by Logan Lowery, our Mississippi State beat writer. This is Double Coverage, a production of the Daily Journal. We're going to talk all things Mississippi State and Ole Miss for the next half hour or so. We're glad you've chosen to click in with us today. Logan, what's going on, man?
Trying to get through this weekend. It's obviously a big weekend in Starkville with Super Bulldog weekend. A lot of fans always come back. It's basically a spring homecoming here at Mississippi State, and doesn't look like very good weather going to be for this year. But I'm sure there'll still be a pile of folks that return to Starkville, and it'll still be a really cool atmosphere to kind of be a part of. And we got baseball, football, softball going on this weekend. I think they've got some soccer and volleyball stuff going on as well. It's always a big weekend here, and just get through that, and after that, it's just down to baseball.
Yeah, these days are fun. It's good to see all this action on campus. Now it's really good when you have weather. You have good weather, and Ole Miss had to play the doubleheader last Saturday against Florida. So the first game was going on during the spring football game, and that affected attendance at spring football. I thought, Logan, it was an interesting take on the importance of college baseball in our state. Everybody didn't just flock to the spring football game. There was a decent crowd. There were people there, but a lot of people were at that baseball game. Ole Miss swept that doubleheader. They won 16-4, and then rallied from 8 runs back in the second game. Rallied from an 8-0 deficit to win 12-10 and sweep that series against Florida. We'll talk baseball here in a little bit. Let's go ahead and start with spring football, Logan. I know you haven't seen much, but you're here at the end now. The Super Bulldog weekend game coming up. What do you know about this team? Have you learned anything about this team from spring football?
Not a whole lot. I'll just be honest. I've seen 2 parts. About 15 minutes of one practice, about 15 minutes of another practice. Those were all individual drills. I didn't see them line up in any formations on either side of the ball. I think I did see maybe some punt stuff where they lined up. And then this past Saturday, I finally got to see them line up in an 11-man formation, and saw them scrimmage a little bit. It was a situational scrimmage. So you really don't know how either side really moves the football or stops the football from being moved. Yeah, you really just couldn't tell just a whole lot. I mean, I walked away from last Saturday's scrimmage really with just one thought that Brian Cole is back from injury, and he's playing that star position again, and he's as good as he was, before he got hurt last season. He really disrupted everything that the offense was trying to do, either from pass rushing off the edge or stopping the run. He was really disruptive. That's really about all I was able to take away from last Saturday's scrimmage. Now, this Saturday for the spring game may be a little different. In talking to the coaches, I haven't talked to Moorhead since Saturday, but his thoughts even then were may have to go situational type stuff in the spring game. It may not be a true spring game this year. Kind of got accustomed to that over the last 9-10 years or so of 2 teams split in half and they kind of go head to head. May not have that this year. Just don't have the numbers at a couple of spots, mainly in the middle there at defensive tackle. They're still waiting on a lot of that signing class to get here to start adding some depth at that spot. They're really thin at some spots at wide receiver. Just don't have enough of those. They just don't have the numbers there right now, and only have 2 scholarship running backs. So the numbers just aren't in their favor as far as to be able to divide the team and split it in half and run a true, scrimmage, game-like type scrimmage. So maybe you see a lot of situational stuff, may not learn just a whole lot about this team this spring, and part of that's my fault. I've been on the road a lot, in California and Oregon and Nashville, and there's been a lot of stuff going on that's kept me away from football. So I really just haven't learned a whole lot about this team. And 2, the entirety of spring practice isn't open. There's only about 3 or 4 periods per day. Those periods last about 5 minutes each, and that's all we get to see. And a lot of that's individual work, and you don't really see a whole lot of, not seeing 7-on-7. You're not seeing any type of scrimmaging going on. So Joe Moorhead has opened up the scrimmages to us, and I've missed one of those. So this past Saturday was my first scrimmage. But like I said, this is probably as little as I've known about a team as far as exiting spring. And like I said, part of that's my fault for just not being there.
Well, I'll tell you what, Logan, at least you got to see the scrimmages. At least there was the possibility there. Obviously, the travel played into that. It was a lot tighter than that at Ole Miss, but you can't conduct a spring game and show nothing. I'm sure that if that was possible, that Matt Luke and these assistant coaches would have found a way to do it. But you can't, put your guys out there and not show anything. They didn't show much. But we were able to see the Rebels play 11-man football for the first time. We'd seen some 7-man football and some half lines, and we'd seen them line up in 11-player formations to practice field goals and extra points. We know they stretch extremely well. We've seen a lot of stretching. But a couple of takeaways from the Grove Bowl last Saturday. You mentioned Cole coming back from injury there at State. Ole Miss has a couple of guys like that. And defensive backs. They started dropping like flies last year, and the first one was their best one, Jalen Jones. He's coming back off an ACL tear. So is Montrell Custis. Custis was a journeyman type of player before last year, but he broke into the lineup. He was a starter, and he was playing some really good football, some of the best of his career, when he went down with an ACL tear early in the season. So those two guys will be nice pieces to come back into the mix in August. They were among many players who were held out and did not participate in the spring game. But, a couple of takeaways here. One of those guys who was injured and did come back and go through spring and went through the contact was running back Devon Penniman. Now, Penniman is far and away their biggest back at 5'11", 238. So, Ole Miss has never had, or it's been a long time since Ole Miss has had that big guy that just bangs and break tackles. When you think of a Leonard Fournette or a Derrick Henry or guys who have come through other programs like that, Ole Miss hasn't had that type of back. Penniman has the size to be that kind of back. He was a 4-star kid in that 2016 recruiting class. They didn't need him to play a whole lot in 16. In 17, he was playing the best ball of his career when he dislocated the kneecap against Texas A&M in November, and that really set him back. He missed the rest of that season. He missed all of 2018. Well, he's back out there now, and we've heard Matt Luke say that he really wants to see Devon Penniman just cut loose, just really trust the knee. And I know that everybody coming off an ACL tear has to make that decision, has to reach that point, and obviously Penniman does. Now, in the game, he was not spectacular. Looked like he was hard to tackle, but he was tackled. He didn't break those tackles yet, but he's still going to be a guy with interesting potential. Maybe he will trust that knee. Maybe that will come during August, but he could be that something different. And I like the running backs for this team, Logan. Even though they didn't show much in the spring game, if you were a fan there and you wanted to see this new Rich Rodriguez run-based spread option really come out and dominate, you were disappointed. That wasn't what happened. They threw the ball probably more than you might have thought. Matt Corral looked pretty good, 22 for 37. Showed some nice arm strength, had some nice touch on a couple of deep balls that were dropped. But those receivers are rebuilding, by the way. But I thought Corral looked good. I liked what the running backs did, even though they didn't line up and just mash and go all the way to the end zone and score touchdowns. They had good runs mixed in. Scotty Phillips, the starting running back, almost 1,000 yards last year. He was available but did not play. They're being very careful with him. But Gerard Connor, and we've talked about him, the freshman from Hattiesburg. He's a guy that I think can help this team, and he showed some nice moves and nice strength in the scrimmage. Isaiah Woolard ran hard as well. I do like the pieces there in the running back room. So that was about all that we were able to take from the offense. like I said, they did throw it a little bit more than we thought they would. Tyler Knight stood out, playing slot receiver, back on offense this year. Small, 5'7", 170, but a tough guy, plays with a chip on his shoulder, that type of competitor. Made some really nice catches in traffic. One of them, a 19-yard catch for a touchdown from Grant Tisdale, who probably will end up being the number 2 quarterback. Knight really tracked the ball well in flight, looking back over his shoulder and then watching it all the way in his hands and making the catch in the corner of the end zone. So a nice day for Tyler Knight. Defensively, Logan, I have said before, I think this team will be better because it can't be worse. You get in trouble with statements like that they were only marginally better last year, not much at all. But I do think this is going to be a better team, and I think that showed up. I think in the spring game you already could see that defensively this is a much better tackling team than it was last year, and I think they'll get better. This will be a team that tackles better. I think this is going to be a team that lines up correctly more often than not, and those are good first steps for the Ole Miss defense. When you talk about a unit that was as bad as the Rebels were last year, remember this was a team that finished number 100 or lower in every major defensive statistical category. Actually, I think number 107 was their best ranking there. So that's what you're dealing with. You want to look down the roster and see the next big thing. Where did you help yourself in recruiting? And I think there's a little help coming here. Sam Williams, the defensive end from Northeast Community College, had 17.5 sacks last year. You always look at those defensive numbers from junior college with an asterisk, okay? But there's something to be gained from that. 17.5 sacks. Had a really good spring. There was a good vibe about Sam Williams this spring, and he had 6 tackles in the spring game and played well. And one of the plays, Logan, a receiver, Miles Battle, came out to block Sam Williams, who is a linebacker. He's an outside linebacker, a stand-up guy in this 3-4. And I remember Jaquez Jones, another Ole Miss linebacker, telling us in interviews the week before that, hey, Sam Williams is the real deal now. He said these receivers, they come out to block him, they're not going to be able to do it. And when Miles Battle came out, Williams just kind of pushed him away. And it's just really, Battle never really got in his body. It was just almost no impediment at all. And then Williams made a nice solo tackle one-on-one. So I think he's a guy that's going to help. Lakia Henry, the number 1 rated junior college inside linebacker, did not sign in December, did not go through spring drills. A late signee. He'll come in the summer. If he's anything nearly as good as his hype, Logan, and having worked in that industry, that isn't always the case. But he's a guy that'll help. And I think also Jonathan Haynes at safety played well. So you got some JUCO guys that could provide some immediate help. But I think by and large, this defense is going to be better coached. It's going to be better, a better tackling group. And that's you can't overstate the importance of that. That's a great place to start. So we didn't see a lot from the Grove Bowl, but we saw a few things. And, I think Ole Miss will be better in several areas, particularly on defense.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm kind of just looking forward to seeing, what State does for their spring game and, and what they're able to do. If it's, I think it's 100% chance of rain on Saturday. So, if it does that, then that's going to impede what they do even further. They've got the personnel issues, and then they're going to have the kind of the weather restraints as well. They may have to just run the ball and, hope nobody gets hurt. I'm sure they're not going to do a whole lot of, it's going to be kind of vanilla like Ole Miss's was. You're really not going to see just a whole lot. They're not going to put it out there, but it's still got to go through the motions and see kind of what they're able to get done on Saturday. Like I said, I don't expect to learn just a whole lot, but like I said, I haven't been able to see much. So any little bit that I can learn at this point, it will be good for me heading into the fall, kind of knowing what to expect from this team. Because like I said, last year the defense was so good, and it's going to be a different style of defense because you don't have those guys up front. Mississippi State's going to have to replace a lot of those guys on the defensive line, but all of their linebackers are back. They got some guys back in the secondary. Terrell Buckley, Mississippi State's cornerbacks coach, said that Cam Dantzler is the best cornerback in the country. And, some of that's probably to hype him up and, get him going as far as the ego. But, Cam Dantzler believes it too. He doesn't necessarily says he's the best corner, but he thinks he can be the best corner in the country. And, it's him going out and proving that he's a guy that's, he's 6'2". He's added about, 20 pounds since he got there. He's 185 pounds now, which tells you he was a real thin guy coming in, but he's a, former high school quarterback, kind of adjusted to playing on the other side of the ball. And, he played well last year. He started all 13 games for Mississippi State last season, and, kind of waiting for him to emerge. He'll be a junior this year. You saw flashes of him as a freshman. Then he came into a starting role last year and did well. This should be a good year for him. And like I said, Terrell Buckley knows what he's talking about. I mean, he won the Thorpe Award himself. He's a college football Hall of Famer, played 13 years in the NFL, won a Super Bowl with the New England Patriots. So he's a guy that knows cornerbacks, and he thinks Cam Dantzler is every bit as good as, a guy that he coached, and Xavier Rhodes and some more pros. He thinks he has that much confidence in him. So we'll have to see if that kind of comes to fruition next season. But they're going to be a little bit different defensively, but like I said, they've got all their linebackers back. Got a good bit of safety, secondary talent back as well. It's just going to be replacing those guys up front.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit. Logan, tell us about baseball. The Bulldogs coming off a 7-5 win over South Alabama on Wednesday night. Ole Miss coming off an 11-2 win over Southern Miss on Tuesday. What do you expect from the Bulldogs against Alabama?
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about Alabama. I just really haven't seen a whole lot of them this year, so I'm going to have to do some research on them later on this afternoon. But I know what Mississippi State's capable of. Right now, Parrish, they've got 10 players in their lineup batting 300 or better. 5 of those are starters. In fact, 5 of those starters are batting 330 or better. So they've got 5 guys in that lineup that are just continually pounding the baseball, and they're hitting with some power. I mean, Justin Foscue hit his 10th home run last night. Tanner Allen's finally getting back into the swing of things. He's been in about a month-long slump, but he had a really good series against Tennessee this past weekend. He had 5 RBIs last night, had a home run and a double last night. So he's starting to come around a little bit, and they really need him too, because he's been a guy that was kind of in that 3 spot for most of this year and just about all of last year. So he's a big part in the meat of that order. They really need to get him going. They actually dropped him down to like 7th or 8th in the lineup because he was just in that slump for about a month. But they moved him back. He was batting in the 3-hole last night and really came through for them. And like I said, South Alabama just kind of kept coming back. Mississippi State would take a 2 or 3 run lead, and like they had a pretty good cushion. And next thing you know, South Alabama would hit a home run or come up with a big hit. So Mississippi State had to continue to pile on runs as that game went on, and were able to pull it out, with a 7-5 win. But this lineup is really good. It's a lot better lineup than Mississippi State's had over the past couple of years. And it's just so balanced throughout the lineup. You don't have just a big guy in the lineup like a Brent Rooker that they had a few years ago. They've got, top to bottom, they've got guys that can hit the ball out of the ballpark. You look at Jake Mangum, at the top of that order. He's been so consistent throughout his career. He's closing in on the SEC hits record. He actually broke Jeffrey Ray's hits record last weekend at Tennessee. So he's Mississippi State's all-time hits leader. He's got, I think, let's see, after last night, maybe 16 more, 17 more. I hadn't done the numbers yet as far as where he's at. He had a double last night against South Alabama, but he's closing in. He could, if he has a really, really good weekend this weekend, he could actually break Eddie Furness's record against Alabama this weekend. I probably think it may come during the midweek game next week. That's kind of, if he has his normal type of weekend, I think he'll be able to break it at home next week in the midweek. But we'll have to see there. The big question mark, though, Parrish, is the health of JT Ginn. He was able to he was scratched from his Saturday start at Tennessee this past weekend. He gave it a go on Sunday. Just really wasn't his usual self. I think they've got some Yeah, I don't know really what the issue is. He's able to pitch. There's really no structural damage in his arm. I just maybe some soreness there. I'm not sure what's really going on with him, but they're going to give him a go again this weekend. Try to see if he can pitch on Saturday, get back into his normal slot. It's kind of just up in the air right now. But Chris Lamona said he probably still is not able to go deep into the game. They're going to try to just see what they can get out of him this weekend against Alabama. But yeah, that's the guy that got to have, a first round draft pick for the Dodgers last year. A guy that, turned down over $2 million to come to Mississippi State. So, talented arm right there. I think Baseball America said he had the best fastball in all of college baseball, and he's just been mowing down hitters left and right. Really doesn't look like a freshman out there on the mound. And you know what you're getting out of Ethan Small. I mean, he's going to give you a consistent effort on Friday nights from the left side. He's been really, really good just mowing down hitters all year long, too. They're really kind of still trying to figure out what they're going to do with that Sunday spot. Peyton Plumlee ended up starting on Saturday last weekend. He's kind of new to that weekend rotation. He's been there before, but they're still trying to find, they've got Peyton Plumlee. Keegan James really hadn't worked out that well on the weekends as far as the starting rotation goes. So they're still looking for kind of that number 3 guy this late into the season, but they've got a deep bullpen. So if they can just make it to that third game, they can kind of piece it together from there if the 2 starters give them the efforts that they normally do.
Well, it sounds like, Logan, that the State and Ole Miss games in that second weekend in May in Oxford, maybe they're all going to be 15-14, all those games, because both of these teams are hitting it really well right now. Ole Miss got off to a slower start, but has really hit a groove of late. And right now, I believe, as I looked at the SEC statistics earlier, that State is number 1 and Ole Miss is number 3 in team batting average right now. The Rebels scored 40 runs and hit 415 against Florida in a sweep last weekend. Logan, think about that. 3 games against an SEC opponent, you hit over 400 as a team. And they had guys hitting over 500 and 600 in the series. The 40 runs, Ole Miss, each of the Rebels games against Florida, where they scored 12, 16, and 12, those were the 3 highest scoring games of SEC play last week. So a really good weekend against Florida. This isn't the Florida team of years past. It's not the pitching that the Gators have had, but it's still SEC level competition. And the Rebels had another good night of offense on Tuesday against Southern Miss, although it was late in coming. 11 runs on only 7 hits. 6 of those runs were unearned. The Golden Eagles helped a little bit by throwing the ball around. They had 4 errors. But one of the interesting things about the Ole Miss offense right now, Logan, is that they're getting contributions from freshmen. And it's not surprising just because of that, because they've signed good players. But we go back to the beginning of the season, the preseason press conference and whatnot. We talked offense with Mike Bianco, and we asked him about his class of recruits. And I said, look, who do you think who's going to contribute? Who will be able to help you? And he said, well, he rattled off a couple of guys. We like these guys. We think they're going to be good players. But it's going to be really hard for these guys to break into this lineup with so much experience returning. Ole Miss returned 7 starters, 7 fielders and the DH from last year's team that led the SEC in hitting. And the thinking was these guys weren't going to be able to break in. In addition to the guys returning, Bianco and hitting coach Mike Clement were very high on a couple of young guys, sophomores who were going to be getting on the field. They thought, who had really good, productive fall camps, and then carried that over into January. Carl Gendel and Tim Elko, but neither of those guys have produced. And then, you got guys like Chase Cockrell that have fallen off a little bit. All of a sudden, you get into the second week of SEC play, and Mike Bianco was looking for answers and started calling on some of these freshmen, guys like Kevin Graham, Knox Laposer. These guys starting to get into the lineup and produce. Laposer going back to his hometown in the Jackson area. He played at Jackson Prep. Was big against the Golden Eagles. This was a 2-1 game in the sixth. Ole Miss was struggling to get over the hump, was leaving some runners on base, and Leposer had a 2-run double. Really helped the Rebels break through. That made it 5-2. He had an RBI single again later in the game. So you're seeing some different guys, some young guys starting to contribute. And the Rebels are still trying to find their way on the mound as well as with State. They're trying to figure out a spot in their weekend rotation. Ole Miss will go TBA against Logan, who we got coming up this weekend? Kentucky. Kentucky coming in. The Rebels will go TBA against Kentucky in that third spot. So we'll see. Probably Houston Roth, I would imagine, will get that start eventually. Don't know about the status of Ryan Olenek right now. He's hitting .398. He's their leading hitter. He missed the game Tuesday, turned an ankle on Saturday against Florida in that third game. Rebels played 2 in that doubleheader. He sat out the Tuesday game. Don't know exactly his availability for the Kentucky series. Cooper Johnson, the catcher, hitting .295, really has increased his production at the plate. He sat out the Southern Miss game with a 1-game suspension after being ejected in Game 3 against Florida. But he'll be back. That was a 1-game thing. But that did open the door for Leposer. Wouldn't be surprised to see him in a DH role at some point during the weekend, that being Knox Leposer. So college baseball, Logan, they're both playing well. It'll be an interesting weekend when they get together here in a few weeks in Oxford. Folks, that's it for this edition of Double Coverage, a production of the Daily Journal. We thank you for clicking in with us today. Come back and join us next week.